on what you do in the situation that Tony Blair found himself as Prime Minister with a Dauphin who'd wanted the job instead of him. He says that if you don't kill Brutus and you don't kill the sons of Brutus, you will not be safe in your position. You cannot have someone who feels they've been despoiled of the kingdom living there alongside you. If you're the prince, you'll never be safe in your place, because that person will continue to feel malevolence, as he puts it, towards you, and no amount of gifts, no amount of soft soap will satisfy them. So you have no choice but to be brutal and to kill them right at the beginning, and not to allow them to stay there alongside you. My view of Gordon was substantially changed when I was sitting at my desk one afternoon in number 10, in the midst of the foot and mouth crisis, and the number 10 switchboard came through, and they said, "We have a call between the Chancellor and the Minister of Agriculture, shall we put you across?" And I said, yes, not thinking two thoughts about it. And then I found myself then on a conversation which I couldn't very easily get out of, between Gordon Brown and Nick Brown, full of caveats saying, for goodness sake, be careful, someone might be listening, and saying very, very disloyal things about the Prime Minister, which I felt really were quite inappropriate. It was funny watching the relationship from outside. It was very much like a married relationship. There were screaming fits, there were moments of true love, there were endless contact. My wife overheard one of their conversations one evening on the telephone. I was sitting in my study listening to it, and she was shocked. She said it sounded like a teenage girlfriend and boyfriend arguing about things with quite extraordinary language. These meetings, which would be the two of them, either in Tony's den or along in the office in number 11, would often get very heated, and you would hear spilling out under the door, shouting and ranting. And sometimes Tony would come out and give accounts of quite how bad-tempered the meetings had been. And I remember on one occasion when Richard Wilson and I both went in, Richard Wilson was the Cabinet Secretary, he said that he had felt physically threatened in the meeting, that Gordon had leant over the desk and he wasn't sure what was going to happen next. The emotions were really very, very high indeed. At the War Cabinet meeting, one of the intelligence chiefs revealed that there was a threat to the Prime Minister's life, and one time I saw Gordon cheer up during this period and a smile crossed his face. Gordon ran a policy that I called the King Herod strategy, and every time an alternative leader appeared, they would be drowned and removed straight away. So if Alan Milburn appeared, he'd have his head chopped off, or John Reed, or even later on David Miliband. So he was very anxious there shouldn't be a rival, and he made sure there weren't. Looking back at it, and if he'd been following the advice of Machiavelli, it's absolutely clear that what he should have done is to have got rid of Gordon Brown right at the beginning. Now, there are many good reasons why he didn't do it, particularly as time went on, because it would have looked petty, because Gordon was a substantial figure in terms of intellect and drive, because he would have formed the kernel of opposition. One of the problems in British politics is, because it's a parliamentary system, if you sack your rival, he doesn't go away. He stays there on the back benches, and he will aggregate enemies around him and make your life more and more difficult. It's not like a company where the CEO can sack his finance director and he goes away. If he stayed on in the board, that would be a real problem. Tony would talk from time to time about really having had enough and wanting to remove Gordon, but he never thought he could sack him. It's what I called the Gordonian knot when we were doing it. It was a problem. You had this balance that you wanted to get rid of him, but you couldn't get rid of him, and you can never cut through this nut and solve it once and for all. I was taken out to lunch once by Robin Cook. He took me to Wilson's and he plied me with bottles of wine. What he was trying to find out was how Gordon was seen in number 10. But he then proceeded to tell me about his relationship with Gordon, which I must admit I'd never known. I realised it went right back to when Gordon went to Edinburgh University as a teenager, and he'd known him very well. And goodness knows, enormous amounts of ink have been spent on cod psychology about Gordon Brown. But Robin's analysis was that his parents had been very strict, very tough, and it was very hard for Gordon to admit that he'd done something wrong. So he would tend to avoid decisions that might lead to problems happening, or if he'd taken a decision and it had gone wrong, blame someone else. Or generally, his character had been formed by this inability to admit to his parents that he'd done something wrong. So I suppose in that sense, he was sort of the opposite of George Washington, saying, "I cannot tell a lie, chop down the apple tree." He would say, "It's someone else that chopped down the apple tree."